Good evening and welcome to In Focus, where tonight's primetime network exclusive is shedding light on vampires in America. They call it the Great Revelation, the moment vampires across the world went on television and revealed their existence to the rest of us. They've been among us all along, they said. And after centuries of hiding in the shadows, they decided collectively to come out of the coffin, so to speak. But no matter how you put it, one thing's for certain, the world hasn't been the same since. Our John Hansen has the story.
At first, it conjured up memories of Orson Welles and War of the Worlds, an elaborate public hoax perpetrated through the mass media. On one single night, in hundreds of countries and dozens of languages, people watching television around the world were treated to the surprise of a lifetime. Here's what it looked like in America.
Most of all, we want to assure you that we pose no danger to you. All we want is to coexist peacefully with you and to enjoy the same rights and freedoms as everyone else.
Entire regions of the globe reacted with outrage and panic. There were widespread riots in Latin America, the Middle East, and Eastern Europe, and many persecuted vampires had to flee for their safety. And where did these vampires want to go? Why, to the U.S., of course. In fact, so many vampires came here seeking asylum that they revived the debate on that most American of hot-button political issues, immigration. But that was then. It's hard to believe how far we've come since that night, but the evidence is all around us. These days, vampires have their own magazines. They have their own radio stations. They have their own bars, and even their own social networking websites.
By now, we know plenty of things about vampires. Whether we can explain how those things are possible is another matter.
But even today, when it comes to vampires, there are still more questions than answers. To get the ins and outs of Vampires 101, we spoke to Dr. Robert Hill, professor of cultural studies at Johnson University in northern Louisiana.
Just like in the myths and the movies, they drink blood, they are fatally allergic to sunlight, and people aren't born vampires, they become them. The prevailing theory is that vampirism is caused by some sort of virus. But so far, no such virus has been identified. And frankly, there are a lot of things that the virus theory can't explain.
Such as?
Such as the fact that vampires are universally stronger and faster than the rest of us by a lot. Also, vampires don't really seem to age. Some say they've been the same age for centuries.
What is your explanation for all this? I mean, it sounds positively supernatural.
Yeah. Maybe you're right.
I'm not interested in labels. Who's to say what's natural? Who's to say that what my body can do is any less natural than what yours can do?
We wanted to get some answers straight from the vampire's mouth. So we met with Nan Flanagan, the spokeswoman for the American Vampire League, the largest vampire advocacy group in the country.
Well, clearly you acknowledge that our bodies can do very different things, so let's get right to it. Which one of us would win in a race?
I'm hardly wearing the right shoes.
How about arm wrestling? Would I stand a chance?
Who knows? You might.
Let's set the record straight. What exactly would happen if you went in the sun?
I'd die.
But aren't you dead already?
Now, do I look dead to you?
What about a stake through the heart?
I'd say that would kill pretty much anybody.
Do you mind if I ask how old you are?
Something tells me you wouldn't be so quick to ask a human woman her age on national television.
While Ms. Flanagan never did disclose her age, she did show me some of her old photographs. See if they help you formulate a guess. Here she is with Senator Hillary Clinton, and here she is with President Roosevelt. Both Presidents Roosevelt, actually. Not to mention that curiously positioned on her wall of personal mementos is a copy of a painting by George Seurat, circa 1886. Yeah, I see the resemblance too.
Okay, we know vampires don't eat, but you do drink blood to survive, do you not?
Well, that's the big question, isn't it? And the answer, of course, is yes, I do. But, as we've been stressing, I can now simply walk into any corner store and stock my fridge full of synthetic blood, which satisfies all of my nutritional needs. Let me be clear about this. Now that the Japanese have perfected synthetic blood, there is no reason for anyone to fear me or any other vampire.
Which, of course, brings us to Tokyo and to the Akinomo Corporation. You see, a few years ago, the Yakinomo Corporation was merely the fourth largest pharmaceutical concern in Japan. That is, until Dr. Kenji Egawa and his team perfected a synthetic blood that was safe to use in trauma patients who had sustained massive blood loss. When you first developed your synthetic blood, who were your customers?
Mostly hospitals around the world.
So you never intended for it to be used by vampires?
No, of course not. At that point, nobody even suspected that vampires existed at all.
But all that was about to change. Soon after Egawa's breakthrough, someone from the still underground vampire community figured out that this synthetic blood was just as nourishing as the real thing. But what to do with this information? We might never know the next part of our story if not for the curiosity of some friends from here in Bonton, Louisiana, deep in the heart of Renard Parish. Meet Andrew Casday, a young man who uncovered a mystery and who started a website that became a phenomenon.
A while ago, we noticed some strange messages posted online in a language that none of us could figure out. We eventually discovered that these messages were a way for the vampires to communicate with each other under our radar.
Andrew and his friends started bloodcopy.com to seek help in deciphering the mystery from others on the web. Posts poured in from around the globe, and the vampire's code was eventually cracked. What they found was shocking. A webcam forum in which vampires weighed the pros and cons of this new synthetic blood and openly debated whether it meant they could finally convince humans that they exist and could now live peacefully among them. In time, a consensus was reached, and the result was the Great Revelation. Soon, companies began mass-producing synthetic blood and bottling it for home consumption. The most popular brand, True Blood, is made by none other than the Yakinomo Corporation. Have you ever tasted True Blood?
No, I haven't.
Well, we just happen to have a bottle of it right here. Why don't you tell us how it tastes?
It tastes very much like blood, I believe.
Is it a pleasant taste?
For me, no. But of course, I am not a vampire.
Dr. Egawa's not the only one with a bad taste in his mouth these days. Meet the Reverend Theodore Newland of the Fellowship of the Sun, an anti-vampire church movement. His message has been spreading far and wide thanks in part to podcasts like this one.
I assure you that the light of the Lord will soon shine down upon them all, and then they will see His terrible glory.
When you refer to the light of the Lord catching up to the vampires, what do you mean?
Eventually, all vampires will be forced to greet the sun.
And who will be doing the forcing?
That's up to the Lord. But as far as I know, God has no law against taking the out of the undead.
Sounds to me a bit like the gospel according to Reverend Newland.
All one needs to do is look at the facts. They made their existence known to us with the advent of synthetic blood. Why? So they could convince us that they were not a threat, because they no longer needed to feed off of us. This implies that for the centuries preceding synthetic blood, that they were a threat, that they did feed off of us.
A fair point, to be sure, and one that Nan Flanagan has no small amount of practice avoiding. One of her more slippery performances came recently on HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher.
I mean, come on, doesn't your race have a rather sordid history of exploiting and feeding off innocent people?
Number one, show me documentation. Doesn't exist. And most importantly, point number two, doesn't your race have a history of exploitation? We never owned slaves, Bill, or detonated nuclear weapons.
Well,
we're citizens, we pay taxes, and so we believe we deserve the same constitutionally protected rights as everyone else.
It's this familiar talking point that Miss Flanagan seems particularly fond of. You see, the debate over vampires has evolved once again with the proposal of the Vampire Rights Amendment, or VRA, which has become one of the most polarizing political issues in our history. Needless to say, the American Vampire League has a big stake in its future. They've been lobbying heavily, and recent polls are indicating a surprising amount of national support.
Thank you. But perhaps this amount of support shouldn't be surprising at all. Here at the Johnson University cafeteria, we found that for every person who still feels a sense of fear and loathing when it comes to vampires, there just might be one or two who feel quite the opposite.
I actually think that people are kind of jealous.
Meet Alexa, one of a growing number of people who seek out the romantic company of vampires. And this is her boyfriend, David.
Imagine being with someone who's had 200 years to learn how to please a woman, but who still has the body of a 27-year-old.
So vampires...
I am potent. Yes.
Tell me about it. And with vampires, you don't need birth control.
How do you feel about the word that some people use to describe your taste? I believe it's fangbanger?
I think it's vulgar. It implies that I'm some sort of prostitute. I prefer fangophile.
Okay, as a fangophile, you let him suck your blood.
Of course. He likes it.
You do.
I do prefer real blood.
It's a total turn on.
But aren't you concerned about becoming a vampire yourself?
No. You don't become a vampire just by letting one suck your blood.
Well, how do you become one then?
All I know is I'm not a vampire, and we've both had each other's blood plenty of times.
So you have tasted his blood. Why would you do that?
Because it's awesome.
Awesome. What do you mean?
If you tried it, you'd know.
Quite a lot to digest, isn't it? While in Bon we thought we'd see what the good folks around here think of all this vampire business. And that means stopping by for a drink at Sam Merlotte's bar. So, any of you ever met a vampire?
Man, them. They're an abomination. The Bible says only Jesus rose from the dead.
Actually, according to the Bible, Lazarus rose from the dead too, thanks to Jesus.
I don't know. To me, they're just so unnatural and dangerous. I hear they can do things to you. I know.
What do you say, Sam? Get many vampires in here?
Can't say as we do. Not a whole lot of vampires in town, as far as I know.
But if one came in, you'd serve him?
Sure. Law says we got to serve everybody.
For now.
Some are saying that the Great Revelation will go down as one of the most significant events in human history. In an instant, we were forced to re-examine every notion we've ever had about life, the natural world, and our own existence. And no matter how you feel about them, it's probably safe to say that vampires are here to stay, and the story is far from over. For In Focus, I'm Tiffany McElroy. We'll see you next time.